What an idiot. He took on $10 million in debt and gave me everything. My ex-wife Blair laughed as she walked out of King County Superior Court with her lover's arm around her waist. The Bellevue condo, the Snoqualmie lakehouse, the Tesla, all hers. And I was left with $10 million I couldn't pay. The judge looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Blair's lawyer smirked. Even my own attorney whispered, "Are you sure about this?" I signed anyway. They celebrated at the Fairmont Olympic that night. Champagne, victory toasts. But their celebration didn't last long because just 1 hour later, "Thank you for being here." Comment below. Where are you watching from and what time is it right now? Because in exactly 1 hour, their smug celebration turned into my perfect revenge. The King County Superior Court smelled like old wood and broken promises. I'd been in this building twice before, once to get married 23 years ago and once to file for divorce 6 months ago. Today I was here to do something that would make everyone think I'd lost my mind. "Mr. Rhodes," Judge Patricia Morrison looked at me over her reading glasses, "you understand that you're voluntarily assuming $10 million in debt obligations?" I stood. My back was straight, an architect's posture. Measure twice, cut once. "I do, Your Honor." "And you're accepting sole responsibility for debts incurred during your marriage?" "Yes, Your Honor." Across the aisle, Blair shifted in her chair. I didn't need to look to know she was smiling. Behind her sat Fay Chambers, my former mother-in-law. Mrs. Fay's eyes locked on me with something between triumph and contempt. I'd never been good enough for her daughter, not successful enough, not ambitious enough. Just an architect who designed community centers instead of luxury condos. Judge Morrison signed the first page. "And Mrs. Chambers Rhodes, you're accepting the marital assets, the Bellevue condominium, the Snoqualmie lake house, and the Tesla with no debt obligations?" Blair's attorney answered, "That's correct, Your Honor." I bet he was. The Bellevue condo overlooking Lake Washington, the lake house where we'd spent summers, the midnight blue Tesla, all gone. In exchange, I got $10 million in debt. "This is highly unusual," the judge said. "Mr. Rhodes, are you certain?" My attorney, Jennifer Hayes, touched my arm lightly. She'd asked the same question a dozen times. "I'm certain, Your Honor. Here's what they didn't know. I'd been planning this for 6 months. Since the day I'd found Blair's phone unlocked and seen the text messages. Since I'd hired Troy Bennett, a forensic accountant. Since I'd hired Nina Cross, a private investigator, worth every penny of her $200 hourly rate. 6 months of evidence, bank statements, transfer records, photographs I wished I'd never seen. Blair had been stealing from me for 3 years. $10 million in loans I didn't know existed funneled into accounts I couldn't trace. Not yet, anyway. This settlement wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Let her think she'd won. Let her take the assets. Let Mrs. Fay sit in that gallery with her smug smile. Because I had something they didn't know about. Evidence, documentation, and a plan. "Very well." Judge Morrison signed the final page. "The settlement is approved. It will take effect in 30 days. The gavel came down. Blair stood first. Her heels clicked on marble expensive shoes, probably bought with my money. Her attorney shook her hand. Mrs. Fay was already heading for the doors. Jennifer gathered her papers. "Evan," she said quietly, "I hope you know what you're doing." "I do, because you just gave away everything and kept all the debt." "I know how it looks." She studied me. Jen was sharp top of her class at UW Law. If she thought I was making a mistake, I probably was. But she didn't know everything. Not yet. Blair left first, those heels clicking triumph. She had no idea I'd documented everything. Every transfer, every lie, every meeting with her business partner at downtown hotels. Tomorrow my father's notary wanted to meet. Something about final estate matters. Dad had died 6 months ago, right when I'd discovered Blair's affair. I'd been too grief-stricken to process estate details. The lawyers said there was a will, some assets. I'd signed papers in a fog. Now, standing in this courtroom where I'd just signed away my life, I wondered if ignoring that meeting had been a mistake. Or maybe it had been perfect timing. The notary meeting I'd mentioned wasn't the next day. My father's instructions were specific, exactly 30 days after the settlement was signed. 30 days. I'd lived with $10 million in debt for 30 days, waking each morning, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The Capitol Hill studio I'd rented after Blair took the Bellevue condo wasn't much. 1,500 square feet, a leaky faucet, a neighbor upstairs who played bass at 2 a.m., but it was mine, paid in cash, no mortgage, no ties to the woman who'd spent 3 years stealing from me. At night, listening to that bass thump through the ceiling, I ran the numbers. 10 million in debt. An architect's salary, maybe 75,000 a year. The evidence I'd gathered, loans, transfers, photos, screamed fraud. But what if it wasn't enough? What if a judge said I should have known better? Troy called twice a week. You breathing, Evan Nina tracked Blair's movements. Jennifer left voicemails I didn't return. I had no answers. The email from Stone and Associates arrived 3 weeks after the settlement. Final meeting required. I almost deleted it, but opened it anyway. October 15th, 2 p.m. Portage Bay Cafe. This meeting cannot be rescheduled. October 15th came cold and gray. I drove my old Honda Civic, 1998, 200,000 miles, check engine light, glowing. The cafe overlooked Elliott Bay. I ordered plain coffee. It tasted like freedom or bitterness. Elias Stone arrived exactly at 2. Silver hair, expensive suit, leather briefcase. He spoke of my father's planning, his patience. Then he slid papers across the table. 12 restaurants, 30 years of careful building. The number blurred my vision. $55 million. Your father hid it, Stone said, especially from your wife. Another envelope appeared, cream paper red. Wax my father's initials. Read this exactly 30 days after your settlement, Stone said. He stood, leaving me staring at everything I'd never known. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Had he known? Had he timed it all? The first words stole my breath. I began to read, and my life shifted forever. The letter spoke in my father's steady voice, calm and certain, explaining why patience mattered, why silence was sometimes protection. He wrote that wealth revealed too early attracts predators and hardship shows true intentions. He had watched Blair closely, listened without judging, and prepared quietly for the moment I would need proof instead of hope. The timing, he said, was mercy, not cruelty. 30 days of fear would teach me resolve. 30 days of debt would strip away illusions and leave only truth. The restaurants were not a rescue, but a responsibility built for endurance, not revenge. I would inherit employees' families and trust not just money. When I finished the cafe, noise returned, dishes, clinking ferries, humming rain, ticking against glass. Stone watched me quietly. Now you know, he said. I nodded, folding the letter with care. Outside Seattle stayed gray, but something inside me finally settled. The debt remained on paper, the settlement unfinished, the risks still real. But I wasn't gambling anymore. My father had already placed the winning hand in my grasp, trusting I'd learned when to hold steady and when to act. I walked out carrying 10 million in fear, 55 million in truth, and a future that finally belonged to me, shaped not by loss, but by patience, timing, and love. Everything had changed as he intended. Evan, my son. If you're reading this, 30 days have passed since your divorce settlement, and I'm already gone. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I'm sorry I stayed silent while you suffered. I had my reasons, and I hope one day you'll understand. 3 years ago, Blair came home late one night talking about a new business partner. Lance Ford, she said, an investor interested in Seattle real estate. She was excited, ambitious. I wanted to be happy for her until I began noticing things. Late meetings, expensive gifts she couldn't explain, the way her face lit up when certain messages arrived. I hired someone to look into it. What I found broke my heart. Blair was having an affair. And it wasn't just about love or desire. It was about money. Your money. Over 3 years, she took out $10 million in loans in your name, funneling it through shell companies to Lance. I wanted to tell you immediately. Twice I came to your house, ready to show you everything. Then Faye Chambers called. Your mother-in-law discovered my investigation. She threatened me, Evan. She knew about old tax issues from the 90s, nothing criminal, but enough to damage everything I'd built. She said if I warned you, she'd report it all and destroy the business I'd spent 30 years creating. I was afraid. I stayed silent, but I didn't stop. I kept digging, and I uncovered something worse. Lance Ford isn't who he claims to be. His real name is Lance Richard Ford. Do you remember Richard Ford? My business partner from the 90s. We started the restaurant together in 1995. He wanted rapid expansion and risky leverage. I wanted slow, careful growth. We separated. I bought him out legally at fair value. Richard never forgave me. His next venture failed. He went bankrupt in 1997. In March of 1998, he took his own life. He left behind a son, Lance, 17 years old. Lance blamed me for everything: his father's failure, his death, the loss of his home. And 25 years later, he returned with a plan. He found your wife, a successful developer married to my son. He seduced her, fed her ambition, convinced her to steal, to borrow, to help him ruin you. This wasn't an affair, it was revenge. For 3 years I gathered evidence, bank records, corporate filings, background checks. Lance has done this before in other cities to other women. I documented everything, and I built you a weapon. Rhodes Family Dining, 12 locations, $55 million in assets, debt-free, clean, fully transferred to you beyond Blair's reach. You accepted $10 million in debt during the settlement. I believe you did it strategically to position yourself for the fight and let Blair think she'd won. That was smart. You just didn't know if you could survive it. Now you do. All my evidence is with the estate documents. Mr. Stone has everything. Recover what they stole. Protect what I built. Show them the Rhodes family bends, plans, rebuilds, and wins. I couldn't fight beside you, but I gave you the tools. Build something strong, son. Something that lasts. With all my love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times while Mr. Stone waited. My father had known everything. He'd protected me in silence. My hands shook, not from fear, but resolve. Mr. Stone, I said, I need all the evidence. It's ready, he replied. That night I made my first call. At 7 a.m. the next morning, Troy Bennett's phone rang. He answered on the second ring, voice rough with sleep. Evan, do you know what time it is? I need you at my studio. Now. I have something you need to see. It's 7 in the morning on a Saturday. I know. Please, Troy. It's important. Silence then. Give me 40 minutes. He arrived in 35. My Capitol Hill studio looked like a crime scene, except the evidence was paper, not blood. I hadn't slept. The 3 boxes from Mr. Stone sat open on the floor. Documents covered every surface. My drafting table, once for blueprints, now held a different design, a map of theft. The air smelled of cold coffee and toner. Every document felt heavier than paper, like it carried weight and intent. Dates, amounts, signatures aligned too perfectly to deny. This wasn't chaos. It was design. Someone had planned this carefully, patiently, expecting secrecy to last forever. Seeing it all together stripped away doubt. Fear had kept me frozen for months, but clarity replaced it. Whatever came next, courts, exposure, retaliation, I was ready to face it. I understood then that hesitation would only help them, and action, even imperfect action, was the only remaining path forward for me, now. Troy stood in the doorway, jeans, Seahawks hoodie, coffee in hand. Forensic accounting wasn't glamorous, but Troy made it look effortless. Jesus, Evan. What is all this? 6 months of my work, I said. 3 years of my father's. He picked up a loan document, then a bank statement, then a filing for Ford Investments, LLC. Your father knew he knew everything. I handed him the letter. Read. Troy read silently. His jaw tightened at the blackmail. His eyes widened at Lance's identity. Lance Richard Ford, he said. Richard Ford's son. My father's old partner. Dead 25 years. Show me the money trail, I pointed. 3 loans, 10 million, all in my name. Blair forged 2 signatures. I signed the third, thinking it was condo repairs. Troy traced the transfers. Money moves from Blair's accounts to Ford Investments within 48 hours. Every time. And from there withdrawals. Cash wires, luxury retailers, hotels, jewelry. Private jets, I said. 3 years of funding Lance's life. Not just spending. Troy said, lifting another file. Investments. Some failed. Some paid off. He was building a portfolio. And Blair helped him. Troy exhaled. This is documented fraud. I know. He studied a background report. Let me check something. He searched his phone. Lance Richard Ford, Seattle. Nothing. Then Richard Ford, obituary, 1998. The Seattle Times appeared, survived by his son, Lance 17. I showed him another article. Rhodes Ford partnership dissolves. Your father bought him out, Troy said. Legally. Fair value. But Richard blamed him. Troy looked at the papers. So a 17-year-old loses. His father waits 25 years, builds a false identity, seduces your wife, and drains you financially. Revenge. Generational, I said. He shook his head. This isn't a divorce case. It's war. I just didn't know. Troy nodded. What's next? I picked up my phone. We need more than money. We need everything. I dialed. Nina Cross. Nina, it's Evan Rhodes. I need everything you have on Lance Ford, because we're not finished. Nina arrived that afternoon carrying a folder thick enough to build a legal case or bury someone under it. I told Troy to stay. He'd been reviewing my father's financial documents for hours, building timelines and notes. When Nina walked in, he looked up like a professor who'd just found a colleague who actually did the research. Mr. Rhodes. Nina Cross was 45, sharp-eyed and precise. Former Portland cop turned private investigator. $200 an hour worth more. You said you needed everything. I brought everything. She opened the folder on my drafting table, pushing aside Troy's papers. Photographs spilled out. Blair and Lance at the Four Seasons downtown. Champagne. Candlelight. His hand resting comfortably on her back. Blair and Lance at the Snoqualmie Resort. Hiking gear mountain backdrop smiling like a travel ad. Blair and Lance stepping off a seaplane in Vancouver. Weekend getaway. Matching designer luggage. 3 years, Nina said. Hotels, trips, restaurants. I've got receipts, security footage, airline records. She slid forward a stack of receipts. Each one tightened my chest. Cartier, $85,000. A watch for Lance, Hermes, $12,000. Birkin bag for Blair. Elliott, Bay Marina. Yacht rental, $3,000 for a weekend. Private jet charter. Vancouver to Las Vegas, $22,000. All purchased with credit, Nina said. Cards in your name. Blair was an authorized user. Every charge landed on accounts you were liable for. Troy let out a low whistle. She wasn't just cheating, she was funding a lifestyle. Lance Ford's lifestyle, Nina corrected, and it gets worse. She pulled out another stack background checks, court records, articles. This isn't his first time. She placed 2 files side by side. Madison Fairchild, San Francisco, 2019, married to a tech executive. Lance met her at an investors conference. 6 months later, she'd taken out $3 million in loans against her husband's stock. Lance vanished. Madison settled for $2 million to avoid charges. Troy leaned closer, and the husband divorced her. She manages properties in Sacramento now. Nina opened the second file. Diana Martinez, Portland, 2021. Inherited money from her father's construction business. Lance posed as a development consultant. Romance, loans. $1.5 million before her family intervened. They paid him to disappear. Diana's still here. Estranged. I stared at the photos. Different women. Same smile. Same man. He's a serial predator, Troy said. With a target profile, Nina added. Wealthy women. Real estate ties. He isolates them, convinces them to access funds, then exits before consequences catch up. But Blair's different, I said. Nina nodded. Yes, the others were about money. This one, she tapped a background report. This is personal. She laid out surveillance photos. Recent. Lance Ford standing at Lakeview Cemetery. Same grave, different dates. March 15th, June 15th, September 15th. Richard Ford's grave, Nina said. Your father's former partner. Lance visits every 3 months. Exactly 15 minutes. He's keeping the grudge alive, Troy said. He's on a mission, Nina replied. The others were practice. Blair Chambers Rhodes, married to Henry Rhodes' son, you were always the real target. I looked at the table. Blair kissing Lance, Lance mourning his father, my money fueling their revenge. Nina, I said, where is Lance right now? She checked her phone, still at the Bellevue condo. Your old place? With Blair? living in my house, sleeping in my bed. For now, Nina said calmly. Once you file, he'll run. They always do. 2 days later, I sat across from Jennifer Hayes in her downtown office watching Seattle's rain streak the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her desk. I'd brought 3 file boxes: Troy's financial analysis, Nina's surveillance records, and my father's 3-year collection. Jennifer opened the first folder: bank statements, transfer records, shell company registrations. Her expression shifted from professional courtesy to sharp focus. How long did it take to compile this? She asked, flipping through Troy's forensic breakdown of the $10 million fraud trail. 6 months for me, I said. 3 years for my father. She looked up. For the first time since I'd entered her office, I saw something other than skepticism. Respect, maybe. Or a recognition that this wasn't a bitter ex-husband with a vendetta. This was an architect who'd built a case the way I'd once built structures. Carefully. Deliberately. With every load-bearing detail in place. Jennifer spent 40 minutes reviewing everything: the forged loan documents, the Ford Investments LLC wire transfers, the photos of Blair and Lance at the Four Seasons, spending money stolen from my accounts on $85,000 watches and private jets, Nina's research on Lance's prior victims, Madison Fairchild in San Francisco, Diana Martinez in Portland. The pattern was undeniable. This is airtight, Jennifer finally said. She closed the last folder and met my eyes. I've been practicing civil litigation for 15 years. I've never seen a plaintiff come in this prepared. I had a good teacher, I replied, thinking of my father's sealed letter. Go and take back what's yours, son. All right. Jennifer pulled out a legal pad. We'll file a civil lawsuit against Blair Chambers Rhodes for fraudulent conversion breach of fiduciary duty and conspiracy to commit fraud. We're seeking full restitution $10 million, plus punitive damages for willful misconduct. Given the evidence, I'd estimate another $2 to $3 million in punitive. She wrote quickly, her pen scratching across the yellow paper. We'll also name Ford Investments LLC as a co-defendant and request immediate asset freezes. I'll file subpoenas for Chase Bank of America and Wells Fargo. They'll participate as third parties, since the loans originated with them. Timeline, I asked. Papers filed by end of day. We'll get a case number by tomorrow. King County Superior Court will assign a judge and set a trial date, probably 8 weeks out, early November. Jennifer looked at me. Service of process happens Monday morning. A courier will hand-deliver the summons to Blair's office in South Lake Union. I imagined it. Blair at her desk, probably reviewing invoices for the South Lake Union development project she'd taken from me. The knock, the certified envelope. Her face draining of color as she read the caption, Evan Rhodes. V's Blair Chambers Rhodes. $10,000 plus punitive damages. She'll call Lance, I said. Jennifer's expression hardened. Based on Ms. Cross's intel, Mr. Ford is currently residing at your former Bellevue condo with the defendant. He'll know within minutes. Good, I said. I stood offering my hand. Let's make sure he knows exactly what's coming. Jennifer shook my hand firmly. Service papers go out Monday, 9 a.m. I left her office and rode the elevator down to street level. Outside, the rain had stopped. I stood on 4th Avenue watching the late afternoon light break through the clouds over Elliott Bay. Monday morning, Blair would open that envelope. She'd see the evidence list 37 exhibits, each one a nail in the coffin she'd built for herself. She'd reach for her phone, hands shaking. Call Lance, again. And somewhere in Bellevue, in my condo, Lance Richard Ford, the man who'd spent 25 years planning revenge for his father's suicide, would realize something. The dominoes were falling, and this time he wasn't the one who'd set them up. Papers were served Monday. 3 days of silence followed. Then Thursday night, she came. I was at my drafting table when the knock hit the door, sharp, insistent, demanding. Through the peephole I saw Blair in a charcoal power suit, hair pulled into the severe bun she wore to client meetings, the armor of a woman who still believed she had leverage. I opened the door. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped, pushing past me into the studio. Rain dripped from her coat onto the hardwood floor as Seattle's October storm hammered the windows. I closed the door behind her, taking back what you stole. You set me up. Her voice cracked anger breaking through the professional mask. That settlement was a trap. You knew you were getting the restaurants. I didn't know, I said evenly. My father's will required delivery 30 days after the divorce. Coincidence. I crossed my arms. But you're right about one thing. I did set a trap. You walked into it 3 years ago when you forged my signature on a Chase business loan. Her face flushed. That loan was for our future. Our future, I laughed, cold and bitter. I've seen the photos. Four Seasons Seattle, Snoqualmie, Vancouver. You and Lance spending my money on Cartier watches and private jets. I stepped closer. You didn't steal for us. You stole for him. Lance is none of your business. Lance Ford is absolutely my business, I said, especially since he's been living in my Bellevue condo, driving my Tesla, sleeping in my bed. Her jaw tightened. She started to argue, then stopped. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, controlled. Fine. I had an affair. You'll get your money back. Drop the lawsuit. We can handle this privately. No. Evan, be reasonable. I am. I picked up a small digital recorder from my desk. Its red light blinked. This conversation is evidence. Everything you've admitted loans the affair. It's all recorded. Jennifer Hayes will add it to Exhibit 38. For the first time, fear flickered across her face. You want a private settlement? I continued. This isn't just about $10 million. It's not even about cheating. I paused. It's about who you cheated with. She frowned. What are you talking about? Lance Richard Ford, I said slowly. Son of Richard Ford, my father's former business partner. The man who killed himself in 1998. The color drained from her face. What? Richard Ford blamed my father for his bankruptcy. He died and left behind a 17-year-old son. I held her gaze. That son spent 25 years planning revenge. He found you, used you. Every dollar you stole was another knife in my family. She backed toward the door. No, you're lying. Lance loves me. Does he? I asked. Madison Fairchild, San Francisco. 2019. Diana Martinez. Portland. 2021. Wealthy women. Married. Both paid settlements after Lance disappeared. I tilted my head. You weren't special. You were a mark. You're lying, she whispered, handshaking on the knob. I have court records, settlement agreements, police reports, I said quietly. Subpoenas are filed. A judge will see everything. She opened the door. Rain rushed in. Panic replaced anger. Lance wouldn't use me. I said nothing. She left. From the window, I watched her hurry down the stairs and climb into the Tesla parked below. Lance sat beside her. Even from 4 floors up, I saw the argument, her frantic gestures, his defensive posture. Cracks were forming. I set the recorder on the sill and watched the taillights fade into the rain. Tomorrow those cracks would widen. Soon everything would collapse. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Mrs. Fay Chambers. I stared at the screen for 3 rings, then swiped to answer and tapped the speaker icon. My recording app was already running. I'd started it the moment Blair left. Old habits from 6 months of evidence gathering. Evan! Her voice was smooth, practiced. The tone she used with country club donors. I think we should talk. Privately. Reasonably. I'm listening, I said. This lawsuit is unnecessary. Blair made mistakes, I won't deny that, but dragging this through the courts will hurt everyone. Your father and I were always cordial. He wouldn't have wanted this ugliness. I almost laughed. Cordial. My father's letter had described 3 years of blackmail. Mrs. Fay threatening to report decades-old tax discrepancies to the IRS if he exposed Blair's affair. She'd held that threat over him until the stress contributed to his heart attack. Mrs. Fay, I said carefully, you have a Tampa condo and a sister nearby. I imagine you've already started planning your exit strategy. Silence. Then her voice changed. You arrogant little man. The country club veneer cracked. You think you've won something. You're nothing but a failed architect living in a studio apartment. Blair outgrew you years ago. Is that right? Lance is everything you're not. Successful. Ambitious. Sophisticated. He saw Blair's potential when you were too small-minded to appreciate her. Her voice rose, sharpening. I have connections in this city, Evan. Business leaders, judges. I will make sure you never work in Seattle again. I'll ruin your reputation. This call is being recorded. I interrupted. Witness intimidation is a crime in Washington state. So is attempting to interfere with a civil lawsuit. Would you like to continue? Dead silence. Anything else? I asked. She hung up. I saved the recording, labeled it Faye Chambers, Threats, 1019, and texted it to Jennifer Hayes with a single line, Exhibit 39. Her response came 30 seconds later. Absolutely. Filing a motion for restraining order tomorrow. I blocked Mrs. Faye's number, poured 2 fingers of scotch into a glass, and returned to the window. Rain streaked the glass, distorting the streetlights below into liquid gold. Somewhere out there, Blair was learning the truth about Lance, that the man she'd risked everything for had used her as a weapon against my family. Somewhere, Mrs. Faye was realizing her threats no longer carried weight, that the power she'd wielded over my father had died with him. The legal machine was rolling now. Jennifer had filed the lawsuit. The banks were cooperating. Evidence was stacking up 39 exhibits and counting. In 8 weeks, we'd stand in King County Superior Court, and a judge would see everything. The forged loans, the shell companies, Lance's history of fraud, Blair's betrayal, Mrs. Faye's blackmail. Nothing they did could stop it anymore. I sipped the scotch and watched the rain. My father had spent 3 years collecting evidence in silence, dying before he could see justice. But I was still here, and I wasn't stopping until every structure they'd built on lies came crashing down. 2 weeks later, the discovery phase began. Both sides had 30 days to produce documents. That was when Lance Ford's entire life unraveled on paper. Jennifer's conference room looked like a war room. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, subpoena responses from Banks County office's court archives. Troy sat at the long table with his laptop cross-referencing financial data. I stood by the window watching early November rain blur the Seattle skyline while Jennifer sorted certified documents. Birth certificate, Jennifer said, sliding a page across the table. Lance Richard Ford, born April 12, 1982. Father Richard Allen Ford. Mother Patricia Ford, deceased 1999. Troy pulled up another file. Name change petition filed 2003. Age 21. Lance Richard Ford becomes Lance Ford. He drops his middle name, his father's name. Trying to distance himself, I said. Or hide, Jennifer replied. She opened another folder. Employment history is thin. No degree, no certifications, no job longer than 18 months. Ford Investments, LLC, registered in 2018. 0 employees. No office. No real investments. It's a shell company. For laundering money, Troy said, turning his screen. Same pattern every time. Madison Fairchild in 2019. Transfers into Ford Investments, then out to luxury purchases. Same with Diana Martinez in 2021. Same with Blair starting in 2022. Jennifer flipped pages. Civil lawsuits. 2 settlements under non-disclosure. Fairchild settled for $2 million in San Francisco. Martinez settled for $1.5 million in Portland. Both cases cited fraud and emotional distress. She looked at me. He's done this repeatedly. And escaped, I said. Until now. Jennifer pulled out a yellow document. Richard Ford's Bankruptcy, 1997. Chapter 7. $847,000 in debt. Primary creditor, Rhodes Ford Restaurant Partnership. I stared at my father's signature on the dissolution agreement. Troy found the obituary. Richard Ford, 46, died, February 1998. Suicide. Survived by son Lance, 17. He scrolled. Police archived the note. Jennifer read aloud. Henry Rhodes destroyed me. He took everything we built. I can't live with this debt. I can't face my family. Patricia, Lance, I'm sorry. Silence filled the room. Outside, a ferry horn echoed across Elliott Bay. He was 15 when the partnership ended, I said. 17 when his father died. He watched his family collapse and blamed mine. He didn't just blame Troy, said. He planned. 1998. Father dies. 1999. Mother dies of cancer. 2003 name change. 2018 Ford investments. Then wealthy married women. This was calculated. Jennifer stacked the files. Blair was the ultimate target. Not only money revenge, he knew exactly who she was married to. He used her to hurt your father's legacy. My phone buzzed. An email. From Whitman and Cross, LLP. Subject Rhodes v. Chambers. Rhodes client notification. Client advises Lance Ford. Departed Seattle November 3rd. Current whereabouts unknown. Client denies knowledge of his location. Lawyer language. Lance ran. The man who spent 25 years plotting revenge saw the evidence, birth, records, name, changes, fraud patterns, and vanished just like before. And Blair, who stole $10 million believing she was loved, was finally alone. I set the phone down. He's gone. Jennifer nodded. Let him run. We don't need him. We have bank records, court filings, witnesses. His entire history is here. I returned to the window, rain streaking the glass. Somewhere Lance Ford was running. Somewhere Blair was realizing she'd been used. The structure was collapsing, and I'd barely had to push. That night Blair called. I let it go to voicemail. I was back at the Capitol Hill studio heating leftover Thai food in the microwave when my phone buzzed on the counter. Her name lit up the screen. I watched it ring once, twice, 3 times, then go silent. A moment later, the voicemail notification appeared. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pressed play. Her voice came through the speaker, raw and broken, crying, Evan, it's me. I know you probably won't answer. I wouldn't either. But I need you to hear this. A shaky breath, background noise, maybe a car, maybe the Bellevue condo. Our condo. The one she'd taken in the settlement. I didn't know. About Lance. About his father. About the revenge. Her voice cracked. He told me he loved me. That we'd build a life together. That you were holding me back, that I deserved more. Another pause. I could hear her struggling to control her breathing. I know what I did. I hurt you. I stole from you. I signed papers I shouldn't have. I ruined everything. A sob. But I didn't know I was being used. I didn't know that he hated your family. That I was just a tool. Silence, then quieter. Can we talk? Please, I'll drop the counterclaims. I'll cooperate. I'll tell the judge everything. Just, please, I don't want to do this alone. The voicemail ended. I set the phone down and looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle, lit against the November clouds. Blair was a victim, and she was a perpetrator. Lance had manipulated her, that much was true. He'd seduced her, lied to her, used her to strike at my family. She'd been a pawn in a 25-year revenge plot she didn't even know existed. But she'd also chosen to have the affair, chosen to forge my signature on loan documents, chosen to funnel $10 million out of our accounts into Lance's shell company, chosen to believe his lies because they justified what she wanted, more money, more status, more excitement than a 55-year-old architect could provide. Lance had used her, but she'd used me first. I picked up my phone and deleted the voicemail. Then I went into settings and blocked her number. No response, no negotiation, no mercy. 23 years of marriage reduced to a blocked contact. The microwave beeped. I pulled out the Thai food, sat at my drafting table, and ate in silence. Outside rain started again, tapping against the windows like Morse code. In 2 weeks we'd have the pre-trial hearing. Blair would appear with a new lawyer, probably someone cheaper, now that Lance had drained her resources. She'd sit across the courtroom from me alone, trying to explain to Judge Morrison how she'd been manipulated into committing fraud. Lance would be gone. Banished to California, maybe, or Mexico, somewhere warm and far from the wreckage he'd created. And I'd be there with $55 million in assets, a mountain of evidence, and my father's legacy to protect. Blair had made her choices. Now she'd live with the consequences. Alone. 6 weeks after filing pretrial hearing day arrived. Blair appeared with her third attorney, King County Superior Court Department 7, the same courtroom where Judge Morrison had approved our divorce settlement 8 weeks earlier. Then the room had been nearly empty. Today the gallery was full. Local media had picked up the story architect sues ex-wife for $10 million fraud. alleges 25-year revenge plot. Reporters filled the back rows. Notebooks, open cameras waiting outside. I sat beside Jennifer Hayes at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Blair sat with a nervous attorney I didn't recognize. David Whitman had withdrawn after Lance fled. The second lawyer had lasted 2 weeks before realizing Blair couldn't pay his retainer. Judge Patricia Morrison entered and we stood. "Be seated," she said, late 50s gray hair and a tight bun, reading glasses low on her nose. Her reputation was legendary, fair, meticulous, and intolerant of nonsense. She opened the file. Civil Action 23-24587, Rhodes versus Chambers Rhodes. This pretrial hearing will determine whether sufficient grounds exist to proceed. She turned to Jennifer. Miss Hayes summarized. Jennifer stood. Your Honor, Plaintiff Evan Rhodes seeks $10 million in restitution for fraudulent loans taken in his name by defendant Blair Chambers Rhodes between 2020 and 2023. Evidence shows 2 forged signatures, 1 loan obtained under false pretenses, and systematic diversion of funds into a shell company, Ford Investments, LLC, controlled by the defendant's romantic partner, Lance Richard Ford. Mr. Ford is not present, Judge Morrison asked. He fled Seattle November 3rd, Jennifer replied. Whereabouts unknown. We've named him as a co-defendant and subpoenaed his financial records. The judge nodded. Defense. Blair's attorney stood shuffling papers. Your Honor, this is a marital dispute. The loans were used for joint expenses and ventures mutually agreed upon. Mutually agreed, Judge Morrison interrupted. She scanned the file. The Washington State Crime Lab reports a 94% probability of forgery on 2 Chase Bank loan documents. She looked over her glasses. That doesn't sound mutual. The attorney swallowed. There may have been misunderstandings regarding authorization. Misunderstandings, the judge repeated coolly. Counsel, your client forged her husband's signature, incurred $10 million in debt, and transferred the funds to her lover's fake investment firm. Is that inaccurate? Silence. Your Honor? The attorney tried again. Mrs. Rhodes was herself deceived by Mr. Ford. That may be, Judge Morrison said, but deception doesn't negate liability. A prima facie case exists. She closed the file. Trial is set for December 9th. Mrs. Rhodes, I strongly advise settlement. This will not go well at trial. She struck the gavel. Court adjourned. The gallery erupted. Reporters rushed out, already typing. In the hallway, Blair approached. Her lawyer hovered behind her. Evan, she said quietly, can we talk settlement? I'll repay you 5-year plan monthly payments. No, please, I don't have $10 million. Lance took everything, the house, the cars. Then you should have thought about that before you forged my signature. Jennifer touched my arm, but I continued. Full restitution, I said, plus punitive damages. That's it. Mrs. Fay emerged furious. You're doing this out of spite. Your daughter committed fraud, I said evenly. Lance Ford used her for revenge, and you enabled it by blackmailing my dying father. I stepped closer. This is justice. She had no reply. A reporter stepped forward. Mr. Rhodes, how do you feel going into trial? I faced the camera, like I'm building something that will last. Jennifer guided me to the elevator. Behind us, Blair stood in the lobby, rain streaking the windows as she pressed her phone to her ear, calling Lance again. He wouldn't answer. Nina had tracked him to Los Angeles under a new name, already hunting his next target. The elevator doors closed. 3 weeks until trial. 3 weeks of waiting felt like 3 years. I used the time to prepare and to remember what I was fighting for. The first thing I did was visit Rhodes Family Dining headquarters in Ballard. I'd inherited 12 restaurants, yet I'd never stepped into any as owner. My father had kept the business separate from our family life. Now I understood why. He'd been building something to protect me. The flagship restaurant sat near the Ballard Locks, a restored brick building with tall windows, and my father's name etched into the glass, Henry Rhodes, founder, 1998. I paused outside watching diners laugh over plates of salmon and craft beer. Tom, the general manager, met me at the door, mid-50s, graying beard, kind eyes. Evan, he said, shaking my hand, your father was a good man. We're glad you're here. He walked me through the kitchen, introduced. The staff showed me the books. Revenue was strong. The restaurants were profitable. My father had built something solid, something meant to last. In the back office, a framed photo hung on the wall. My father at the grand opening in 1998, arm around a younger Tom, smiling like a man who knew he'd done something right. He talked about you all the time, Tom said quietly. Said you built things properly. I'm trying, I said, my throat tight. 2 days later, I found myself in a Capitol Hill bookstore wandering the architecture section. I wasn't searching for anything specific, just quiet before the storm. That's a good one, a voice said behind me. I turned. A woman in her mid-50s stood nearby, dark hair streaked with gray, warm smile. She nodded at the book in my hand. The Architecture of Happiness, about how spaces shape emotions. I could use some happiness, I said, surprising myself. Rough week, rough year. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She owned the bookstore, having left publishing 15 years earlier. We talked for 20 minutes. I told her I was an architect finding my way back. I didn't mention lawsuits, betrayal, or revenge. For 20 minutes I was just Evan, and it felt good. Come back sometime, she said as I paid. We host design lectures on Thursdays. After all this, I said, maybe I will. Walking into the December cold, I felt something unfamiliar lightness, a future beyond courtrooms. The night before the gala, Jennifer, Troy, and Nina gathered at my studio. Lance is still in Los Angeles, Nina said, living in Silver Lake as Marcus Reed. The FBI is building a wire fraud case. He's already contacting women on high-end dating apps. Blair, I asked. Liquidated her investment accounts, Troy replied. 2.1 million transferred to escrow. She's still 8 million short. Jennifer closed her folder. Trial's in 10 days. But tomorrow night is the Seattle Architects Fund Gala. Blair will be there. She's on the board. 500 guests. Media. City officials. I nodded. I'd planned this. I'm giving a speech. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. About what? My father's legacy. Rhodes family dining. Community responsibility. I met her gaze. And justice. Nina smiled. You're going public? She's been hiding behind lawyers, I said. Tomorrow I tell the truth. In front of everyone who matters. Jennifer considered, then nodded. Make it count. After they left, I laid out my navy suit, the one from my father's funeral. On my drafting table lay an old wedding photo, Blair and me laughing on Kerry Park steps. I studied it for a long moment. Then I placed it face down in a drawer. Tomorrow night, 500 people would gather at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Blair would smile, network pretend nothing was wrong. I'd be there too. And I had a speech she wouldn't see coming. The next evening I stood outside the Fairmont Olympic. Black tux, no date, one purpose. I walked in. The grand ballroom was a cathedral of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers bathed 500 guests in warm light. Architects, developers, city officials, philanthropists. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the stage. Champagne flowed. The Seattle Architects Fund Gala was the social event of the season, and everyone who mattered was present, including Blair. I spotted her near the silent auction tables. Burgundy gown, designer cut hair in soft waves, smile perfectly rehearsed. She stood beside Mrs. Fay, who worked the room like a veteran fundraiser. Blair was networking carefully, urgently, trying to salvage a reputation already cracking. I watched her charm a prominent developer, laughing, touching his arm. I knew the script without hearing it. The divorce was amicable, exciting. New projects moving forward. She was pretending the lawsuit didn't exist, pretending her world wouldn't collapse in 10 days. I took a glass of sparkling water and went to my assigned table. Dinner was served at 8. I sat with colleagues from the American Institute of Architects. Faces I hadn't seen in months. Blair was 3 tables away, surrounded by board members. Evan, one of them, said cautiously, "We heard about everything. How are you holding up?" "Justice will come," I replied. At 8:30, the award ceremony began. Patricia Pierce, the fund's president, took the stage. She thanked donors, announced scholarships, praised projects. Then she paused. "Our final award tonight is bittersweet," she said. The Lifetime Achievement Award honors someone who shaped Seattle's business and architectural community for decades. This year it is awarded posthumously. My chest tightened. The 2024 Lifetime Achievement Award goes to Henry Rhodes, founder of Rhodes Family Dining, accepting on his behalf his son architect Evan Rhodes. Applause filled the room. I stood. Across the ballroom, Blair's face drained of color. Mrs. Fay grabbed her arm, whispering urgently. I walked to the stage, accepted the crystal plaque engraved with my father's name, and faced the crowd. My father taught me something when I was young, I began. He said buildings need solid foundations. If the foundation is weak, everything above it will crack and fall. I paused. He was right. Buildings need solid foundations. So do relationships. So does trust. Behind me, the projection screen flickered to life. I'd arranged it with the AV team earlier, claiming I wanted to show photos of my father's restaurants. That wasn't what appeared. A Chase Bank statement filled the screen. My name at the top, a highlighted transfer. March 15, 2021, $400,000 from Evan Rhodes' business account to Blair Chambers Rhodes, Memo Investment Capital, Ford Investments, LLC. The room went silent. 3 years ago, I said calmly, someone I trusted forged. My signature took out loans in my name and transferred $10 million from accounts I built over decades. That money went to a shell company. It was never invested. It was spent. Images changed, Cartier receipt, private jet invoice, luxury hotels. Gas rippled through the ballroom. Blair stood abruptly, chair scraping. She clutched her purse and headed for the exit. Mrs. Fay reached for her. Blair pulled free. My father spent 3 years gathering evidence before he died. I continued. He left me his business, 12 restaurants, $55 million in assets, not as a gift, but as a tool, because he knew I'd need it to fight for justice. The screen changed again. A court filing appeared. Rhodes v. Chambers Rhodes, King County Superior Court. Trial date December 9th, 2024. In 9 days, I said a jury will review bank records, forged signatures, and fraudulent transfers. The man who orchestrated this, Lance Richard Ford, has fled under a false name. I turned and looked directly at Blair, frozen near the exit. But the person who signed the documents betrayed 23 years of marriage and stole while my father was dying. I let the silence stretch. The ballroom erupted. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the microphone, raising my voice above the uproar, please let me finish. The next slide appeared. 3 loan documents filled the screen, aligned side by side. Red circles highlighted the signatures at the bottom. My name, Evan Rhodes, written in handwriting. That was not mine. This is a $10 million fraud, I said calmly, my voice amplified through the now silent ballroom. Committed by my ex-wife, Blair Chambers Rhodes, between 2020 and 2023. She forged my signature on 2 loans and misrepresented the purpose of a third. The money was funneled into a shell company and spent on luxury goods, travel, and fictitious investments. Gasps rippled across the room. 500 faces stared at the screen. The slide changed. Photographs appeared Blair and Lance at the Four Seasons Seattle, at Snoqualmie Falls, at a resort in Vancouver. In every image they were smiling, touching, unaware they were being documented. Her accomplice, I continued, was Lance Ford, a man she introduced as a business partner, a potential investor. I paused. But Lance Ford is not who he claimed to be. The screen shifted again. An obituary from the Seattle Times dated February 1998. Richard Allen Ford, 46, passed away February 14, 1998. Survived by wife Patricia and son Lance, 17. Below it appeared another article from 1995, Rhodes-Ford Restaurant Partnership dissolved amid financial dispute. Lance's real name is Lance Richard Ford, I said. He is the son of Richard Ford, my father's former business partner. Their partnership collapsed in the 1990s. Richard filed for bankruptcy in 1997 and blamed my father for everything. In 1998, Richard Ford took his own life. The ballroom was silent. Lance was 17 when his father died. He spent the next 25 years planning revenge. Blair was never his lover. She was his tool. For 3 years, she helped him steal from my family. Dismantle my father's legacy and fund a vendetta she didn't even understand. Another slide appeared. Lance standing at a cemetery, head bowed. Then photos of Lance with different women, one in San Francisco, one in Portland. Lance Ford is a serial con artist, I said. He targeted wealthy women, seduced them, and stole from them. 2 prior victims settled under non-disclosure agreements. Blair was victim number 3. From the audience, Blair's voice cut through the silence. "This is slander." I turned toward her. She stood near the exit mascara, streaked with tears. "It's not slander if it's true," I replied evenly. "Every document shown is public record filed with King County Superior Court. Every photograph was legally obtained by a licensed investigator. You're free to verify." She said nothing. The screen shifted one final time, an audio waveform pulsing across black. I pressed the remote. Mrs. Fay's voice echoed through the ballroom. "You're a failed architect. I'll make sure you never work in Seattle again." Then my voice. "This call is being recorded. Witness intimidation is a crime in Washington State." The audio stopped. "That I said is Fay Chambers threatening me 2 weeks ago. It's filed as Exhibit 39. Mrs. Fay stood abruptly and rushed out. "Tomorrow," I continued, "this case goes to trial. A jury will see everything you've seen tonight and more. They'll decide whether Blair Chambers Rhodes repays the $10 million she stole. But tonight I wanted Seattle to know the truth, to know what my father endured before he died." I gripped the microphone. "I'm speaking for him now." I stepped off the stage. For 3 seconds the ballroom was perfectly still. Then it exploded. Conversations erupted. Phones were raised. Hashtags spread instantly. Blair fled through the doors as reporters chased her into the rain. I walked the other way. Outside, cold November rain soaked Fifth Avenue. My phone buzzed with calls I ignored. A text from Jennifer appeared. "You just went viral. Trial will be chaos. Well done." I pocketed the phone and walked into the rain. Tomorrow was the trial. Tonight was only Act 1. And it was a hell of an opening. I barely slept. Social media was still buzzing about the gala when I arrived at the courthouse. The gallery was already packed. December 9th, King County Superior Court Department 7, trial day. The line to enter stretched down the hallway. Reporters jostled for seats. Local news stations broadcast live from outside. Inside every bench was filled journalists, architects, law students, and onlookers who had followed the story overnight. Rhodes v. Chambers had trended for hours. By morning, half of Seattle knew the details. I sat beside Jennifer Hayes at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Blair sat with her third attorney, pale and rigid. Mrs. Fay was absent. Nina confirmed she'd fled to Tampa the morning after the gala. Judge Patricia Morrison entered. We stood. "Be seated," she said, scanning the crowded courtroom. "Despite last night's theatrics at the Fairmont Olympic, this court proceeds on evidence testimony and law, not public opinion." She turned to Jennifer. Ms. Hayes' opening statement. Jennifer rose. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of fraudulent conversion conspiracy and breach of fiduciary duty. Between 2020 and 2023, defendant Blair Chambers Rhodes forged her husband's signature on loan documents, stole $10 million, and transferred those funds to her lover's shell company. The evidence is forensic documented and conclusive. We seek full restitution and punitive damages." Blair's attorney offered a weak rebuttal about marital finances and misunderstandings. Judge Morrison looked unimpressed. "Call your first witness." Troy Bennett took the stand. He methodically walked the court through the financial trail, forged signatures, shell companies, wire transfers from my accounts to Blair's, then to Ford Investments, LLC. Spreadsheets, bank records, corporate filings filled the screens. It was clinical, devastating. Next, Nina Cross testified. She presented surveillance photos of Blair and Lance at hotels and resorts spending my money. She detailed Lance's prior victims, Madison Fairchild and Diana Martinez, showing the same pattern of seduction and theft. Then Jennifer called me. I took the stand, swore the oath, and explained the timeline, discovering the affair, finding irregularities, hiring investigators, learning my father was dying. "Why didn't you confront your wife immediately?" Jennifer asked. "I needed the full scope," I said. "Confronting her too early would have destroyed the evidence." "Did you know about your inheritance when you signed the settlement?" "No. I believed I was accepting $10 million in debt without protection. It was a calculated risk." "And the gala presentation?" Every document shown is public record filed with this court. I told the truth. Blair's attorney cross-examined, accusing me of spite. You planned this for revenge, didn't you? No, I replied. I planned for justice. I gathered evidence. I filed a lawsuit. He had no follow-up. Blair testified next. She admitted the affair, claimed Lance deceived her, denied intent. Under Jennifer's questioning, she contradicted herself, first claiming I authorized the loans, then admitting she signed 2 documents herself. The courtroom stiffened. At 4 p.m., Judge Morrison called closing arguments. Jennifer summarized the evidence. The defense begged for leniency. At 4:30, the judge ruled. This is the clearest case of fraudulent conversion I've seen in 20 years, Judge Morrison said. The handwriting analysis is conclusive. The financial trail is undeniable. Blair's hands trembled. Judgment for plaintiff. Full restitution $10 million. Punitive damages $2 million. Legal costs $200,000. Total $12.2 million payable immediately. She struck the gavel. All assets awarded in the divorce settlement are reversed. Immediate seizure is ordered. Miss Chambers Rhodes has 30 days to vacate. She removed her glasses. This matter is referred for criminal prosecution. Court adjourned. Blair collapsed forward. Deputies approached with paperwork. Jennifer shook my hand. Congratulations. I walked out into the cold December air. Reporters shouted my name. I didn't stop. 8 weeks earlier I had left this courthouse looking ruined. Today I left victorious, not by chance, by preparation. Because architects measure twice and cut once. The first month after the trial I was numb. The second I started working at Rhodes. By the 3rd January, winter settled over Seattle and I could finally breathe. Jennifer called late one afternoon. Asset seizure is complete. The Bellevue condo sold for $1.8 million. The Snoqualmie Lakehouse for $950,000. The Tesla for $60,000. Combined with Blair's liquidated accounts, we've recovered $4.9 million of the $12.2 million judgment. And Blair, I asked, living in a 400-square-foot studio in Greenwood. She's a receptionist at a dental office in Northgate. I stared out the window of my Capitol Hill studio, the one I'd kept even after winning. It felt honest, real. 23 years of marriage reduced to 400 square feet. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. 2 weeks later, Jennifer called again. The FBI arrested Lance Ford in Los Angeles. He was using the alias Marcus Sterling, living in Silver Lake, targeting women on high-end dating apps. Charges: wire fraud, multiple counts. Madison Fairchild and Diana Martinez came forward after your gala went public. They're cooperating. She paused. He's facing 5 to 10 years. They want you to testify. I will, I said. Lance Richard Ford, the man who spent 25 years plotting revenge, would spend the next decade behind bars. It wasn't justice for his father, but it was something. I ran into Mrs. Fay at a Ballard grocery store in early February. She looked smaller, older, her elegance replaced by yoga pants and a fleece jacket. We stood facing each other in the produce aisle. Are you satisfied? She asked flatly. Just finished, I said. Blair's a receptionist now, she said bitterly. 48 years old, $17 an hour. She's lucky she's not in prison with Lance. Her face crumpled. I pushed her too hard, she said. I told her you weren't ambitious enough. I thought Lance was better. You taught her that money mattered more than integrity, I said. That success meant status, not character. She had no reply. I walked away. I wasn't satisfied, just tired. Healing came slowly. I worked at Rhodes Family Dining, learning the business meeting staff, honoring my father's vision. I went to therapy. I designed a community center in South Seattle pro bono. Something Dad would have liked. The media attention faded. Seattle moved on. One afternoon in late February, I stood in Rhodes headquarters, looking at my father's portrait. I kept my promise, I said quietly. Spring came early. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the Burke-Gilman Trail. The city thawed. In March, I was browsing the architecture section of the Capitol Hill bookstore when I heard a familiar voice. You came back. Sarah Mitchell stood near the counter, smiling. I told you I would. How are you? She asked. Better, I said, getting there. She nodded. Lecture next Thursday. Frank Geary. Come. I will. She smiled. I'll save you a seat. I left with a book on sustainable architecture and a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That coffee became dinner. Dinner became months of slow, careful rebuilding, not just my life, but my trust. By summer, 6 months after the trial, Seattle bloomed, and so did I. Rhodes Family Dining expanded. I opened 3 new locations: Belltown, Fremont, and Columbia City. 15 restaurants total, employing over 200 people. I focused on what my father valued: quality ingredients, fair wages, community presence. Profit mattered, but meaning mattered more. Your dad would be proud, Tom said one afternoon in Ballard as we reviewed quarterly numbers. Revenue was up 18%. Employee retention was the highest in 5 years. I hope so, I said. Architecture returned too. The South Seattle Community Center I'd designed pro bono in my father's honor won the AIA Washington Council's Late Career Emerging Architect Award in May. I laughed when I heard, "At 56, I'm emerging," I told Sarah. Better late than never. She smiled. Some foundations take longer, but they last. Sarah Mitchell. Our coffee after the bookstore lecture became dinner the next week. Dinner became walks along the Burke-Gilman Trail, Saturday mornings at Pike Place quiet evenings, in her Capitol Hill bungalow, with wine and architecture books. She was 50, divorced 10 years earlier, amicably, she said. No children. She'd built her bookstore from nothing. She understood what it meant to create something solid. We took it slow. I needed slow. After 23 years of betrayal disguised as marriage, I'd forgotten what a healthy partnership looked like. Sarah reminded me. She met the Rhodes staff in April at the Ballard anniversary party. She talked with servers, asked cooks about their favorite dishes, listened when Tom described my father's leadership philosophy. By the end of the night, everyone liked her. She's real, Tom said quietly. I know. We didn't rush anything. No talk of marriage or moving in. Just trust, built one careful day at a time. You remind me that not all partnerships end in betrayal, I told her one evening on her rooftop garden watching the Space Needle glow. Some of us keep our promises, she said, taking my hand. Blair's first payment arrived in late May, $50,000, wired under the court-ordered plan. She'd never repay the full judgment. I didn't keep it. I transferred it to the Rhodes Employee Scholarship Fund, created for staff members' children. The first recipient was a line cook's daughter heading to Seattle University. From theft into something good, I told Jennifer. She nodded. Your father would have liked that. I visited my father's grave on a warm June evening. I brought his favorite coffee and set it on the headstone. I kept the business, got justice. Found peace, I said. I met someone good. I measured wrong once. I'm measuring carefully now. I left feeling lighter than I had in years. Late June, Sarah's rooftop, salmon roasted vegetables, Washington Riesling. We should go to Vancouver in August, she said. I'd like that. You never talk about her anymore, she said. That chapter's closed. And this one, writing it carefully, I said, with a solid foundation. She raised her glass to solid foundations. I clinked mine. And architects who finally learned to read blueprints. The city hummed below us. Hard won, real, and finally built to last. That was a year ago. Today I'm 57. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And if you're listening to this true story, maybe at your kitchen table, maybe on a commute, maybe wondering if it's too late for justice in your own life, I want to leave you with what I learned. Justice isn't revenge. It's accountability. Blair destroyed herself the moment she forged my signature. I just made sure the legal system recognized it. Revenge would have been petty, bitter, short-lived. Justice, real justice, is slow, methodical, and permanent. Document everything. Seriously. Bank statements, emails, text messages, photos. I spent 6 months building a case with Troy and Nina before I ever filed a lawsuit. That evidence saved me. Without it, I'd be the bitter ex-husband with accusations and no proof. With it, I won $12.2 million and walked away with my integrity intact. Patience is strength. I waited 6 months after discovering the affair before confronting anyone. Those 6 months felt like torture, but they gave me time to investigate, to understand the scope, to build an unbeatable case. If I'd confronted Blair immediately, she would have destroyed evidence and I'd have lost everything. Calculated risks backed by preparation can succeed. Signing that divorce settlement and taking on $10 million in debt looked insane. But I'd done the math. I knew my father's will was coming. I knew the evidence was solid. It was a gamble, yes, but it was calculated, and it worked. Do I regret parts of those 23 years? Yes, but they taught me what I didn't want, and sometimes that's just as valuable as knowing what you do want. Blair Lance misses. Faye, they're broken people hurt others. I understand that now. It doesn't excuse what they did, but it explains it. I chose to forgive myself, not them myself. For ignoring the warning signs, for trusting too easily, for staying too long. Carrying anger is like carrying blueprints for buildings you'll never construct. Eventually you have to set them down and design something new. By God's grace, I was given a second chance to rebuild not just my finances, but my faith in people, in partnership, in the possibility of love after betrayal. That grace reminded me that even broken foundations can be cleared and replaced with something stronger. If you're 55, 60, 70, it's not too late. I rebuilt at 56, found love at 57. Your foundation may have cracked. Pour a new one. This true story isn't about me being exceptional. It's about being strategic, patient, knowing your worth. I'm sharing this as one of many grandpa stories. Lessons learned the hard way, so maybe you won't have to learn them the same way. These grandpa stories aren't just mine. They belong to everyone who's had to start over. Don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough. Not a spouse, not a mother-in-law, not society. You define your worth, then defend it. Comment below with your city and your story. Let's build a community people who've fought for justice, who've started over, who believe in second chances. Subscribe to hear more grandpa stories like this, true story tales of resilience, strategy, and hard-won wisdom. Because life doesn't end at 50, or 60, or 70. It just gets rebuilt. Remember, you're the architect of your life. Design it well, measure twice, cut once, and never ever sign without reading. This is Evan Rhodes signing off. Build solid foundations, folks.